Pity the poor pigeon, pigeonholed as it were, rarely given its due. Sunday Morning's newest contributor is birdwatcher or birder Christian Cooper.
Meet Dinosaur, the 17-foot-tall, 2-ton aluminum pigeon. For the next year and a half, its perch will be New York City's High Line.
Pigeons and birds, as we know, are what remains of dinosaurs. So what if we transform a pigeon and we bring it into a scale of a Tyrannosaurus Rex?
Artist Ivan Argote showed us Dinosaur as a work in progress.
Maybe we're looking now what pigeons see from us. Maybe we're now the pigeons and we're the ones running away, and then they're like the dominant ones.
I don't know what city you live in, but pigeons don't run away in our city. They like, come over.
Argote says it's about time pigeons get the hero treatment.
Dinosaur is like a very serious proposition of what could be a monument that doesn't celebrate men, a war, victory, but that celebrates a bird that's been with us since forever.
But the project, like the bird itself, plays to mixed reviews.
People either love them or hate them, but still, it's a very iconic animal of New York City.
And New York isn't the only city paying tribute to them. Earlier this year, the London Museum unveiled its controversial new logo.
Why do you think so many people are not too keen on pigeons?
My personal belief is they don't see them, they don't watch them, they don't understand them.
Rita McMahon, who founded the Wild Bird Fund, a rehab center for injured wildlife in New York City,
They have their own world up there.
points to a put-down from the 1960s.
When the city was in its most disrepair, Hoving, who was the head of the Parks Department, he called pigeons flying rats.
Rats with wings,
Yes, that's true.
and it stuck.
That was terrible.
Early European settlers brought pigeons to America to breed as food. Some became feral, and as we built cities with tall buildings, these natural cliff dwellers found themselves right at home.
They like high places. We're giving them cliffs. The canyons of New York, we are their cliffs now.
During both World Wars, pigeons became valuable partners thanks to their visual acuity and homing ability.
They were war heroes. They received more medals of honor for saving lives than any other animal. And so this would be what a paratrooper would connect to their parachute. They would leap out of the plane, come down to the ground, and they have their pigeon to be able to send messages.
McMahon says pigeons score off the charts on visual intelligence tests.
They can recognize words. They can recognize when it's a garbage word. Those letters don't go together. They know landmarks, they remember things, they remember people, and they're the main wildlife that people get to see. If we can get people to look and understand pigeons, it's their gateway bird to seeing nature more.
At New York's Wild Bird Fund,
It's all right.
more than half of the 12,000 birds they receive each year are pigeons.
Beautiful red coloration on these two.
Some are just babies, and a handful, unreleasable into the wild, get adopted.
Look at you, so cute. Look how pretty she is.
Gobe was one of those few. Jeffrey Jones, her pet parent, says she's one spoiled pigeon.
She is like a housebroken pet. Like, she loves to like just lay around and preen and watch TV. I mean, I'm not joking.
Watch TV.
Yes.
What is her favorite program?
Criterion Channel.
Oh, so she's a very elite bird with refined taste.
Yes, refined taste.
Jones, a high-fashion photographer, volunteers at the Wild Bird Fund and takes pictures of their pigeons, too. In 2020, during COVID, he and his wife, Jada, fostered Gobe. They never intended to become pigeon parents, but when they gave her back...
I know this sounds crazy, but I noticed that she was looking sort of sluggish in the cage, and she seemed really depressed. And like, this bird is like not doing well, like by itself. I said, I'm taking Gobe. She's not doing well. She's gonna die there. So like, I took her.
You're moved by this.
Yeah.
To your credit, your humanity and Jada's humanity won out.
Now I'm married with pigeons.
Pigeons like Gobe can live around 15 years. In the wild, their lives are substantially shorter. They celebrated her 4th birthday this past July.
Gobe's amazing in every single way. Like, I don't know, I wake up every day. It's Gobe's world, you know? We're just living in it.
Along with the pomp, pageantry, and punditry of this week's Democratic National Convention will be plenty of images of one particular animal, the donkey. But why? Connor Knighton has our answer and much more.
Democrats and donkeys have been linked ever since the election of 1828, when Democratic candidate Andrew Jackson's opponents labeled him a jackass. Instead of taking offense, Jackson embraced the association. Decades later, after political cartoonist Thomas Nast depicted Democrats as donkeys, the symbol really took off. Although the donkey has never been an official party emblem, you will undoubtedly see it on display this week as the Democrats gather in Chicago. But to witness an actual gathering of donkeys, you'd be better off heading to the small town of Beatty, Nevada.
Burros are just part of Beatty. You don't think of Beatty without burros.
At Happy Burro Chili and Beer, Beatty locals admit to not always being happy about the town's famous four-legged residents.
I have a love-hate relationship with them, actually. I think they're funny. I hate that they get in my garbage. I hate that they poop everywhere.
Oh, golly!
Donkeys can be cute, but they can also be a nuisance, knocking down fences and chewing up gardens.
It's a show of hands who's had a burro in the backyard.
Oh.
Okay, all right.
Burro, by the way, is just Spanish for donkey. It's the exact same animal, although people tend to refer to wild donkeys as burros. While they're originally from Africa, they've been in North America for centuries.
We're talking late 1400s, 1500s, Spanish explorers, early missionaries, some mining operations used burros.
And so brought to work.
Yes, brought to work, you bet.
Gus War is a program manager with the Bureau of Land Management's Wild Horse and Burro program. The American West was built on the backs of burros until changing times and technology made the animals less necessary.
Once their usefulness was used up, a lot of people would just turn them loose. So they truly became wild animals.
For decades, it felt like the Wild West in terms of how the free-roaming horses and burros were managed.
There was animals that were being gathered up and sent to slaughter.
Before hearing our first witnesses...
That all changed in 1971.
The proposed legislation would give them status as a national heritage species.
Velma Johnston, known as Wild Horse Annie, successfully led a campaign to protect wild horses and burros, testifying in Washington alongside school children who rallied to the cause. The passage of the 1971 Free-Roaming Wild Horse and Burro Act proclaimed the animals, quote, living symbols of the historic and pioneer spirit of the West, and ensured that they would be legally protected from capture, branding, harassment, or death. It worked.
As far as protection, I mean, the animals are thriving. Almost too much now.
Today, there are more than 14,000 burros wandering around public lands, where they can overgraze and threaten delicate ecosystems, or end up on roads and cause traffic accidents. Attempts to control fertility have been largely unsuccessful, so the Bureau of Land Management removes the burros through frequent roundups, controversial due to the way the process can stress the animals. The government would love for you to take one home through their adoption program.
Discover the magical bond you can enjoy with a wild horse or burro.
But not all the burros find homes. That's where Mark Myers steps in.
I'm the donkey guy, because I don't think donkeys got their fair shake.
Myers is the executive director of the nonprofit Peaceful Valley Donkey Rescue.
Take your hat off, walk into any bar and pass it around, say, I'm raising money for the donkeys, you're going to get laughed out of the place.
This sprawling ranch in San Angelo, Texas, takes in everything from abused domestic donkeys to wild burros the government struggled to adopt out.
We joke that it's a backyard hobby gone horribly wrong.
Mark and his wife Amy purchased a pet donkey in 1999.
This is Izzy.
Its gentle, almost dog-like quality.
It's good stuff right there.
Challenged their preconceived notions about the species.
When you talk to people about donkeys, what are the stereotypes that you hear?
They're stubborn, they're stupid, they're lazy, and it's like none of that is true. They are loyal, they're protective.
This is Almond Joy. This is Betty White.
Oh, this is Betty.
The goal here is to tame these donkeys and get as many as possible adopted.
Hey.
Carrie and Brad Dawkins are here to pick up Hank and Miles.
Oh, they're precious. They're so sweet.
Meyer says his rescue has adopted out nearly 11,000 donkeys. He also just opened a donkey history museum north of Las Vegas to make people more aware of their often overlooked contributions.
They're forgotten.
Yeah.
And I just feel it's my job to make people know all that they've done.
You might call them nature's real-life blue bloods, horseshoe crabs, ungainly creatures, uniquely valuable to humankind. Connor Knighton has the story of a species.
Located between Delaware and New Jersey, the tranquil waters of the Delaware Bay offer a bit of calm compared to the open ocean. But for a couple of months each year, there is a chaotic party on the beach. The bay is home to the world's largest population of horseshoe crabs.
Are they looking for mates at this point? What's happening?
These are all males mostly, and they're looking for a female.
Lisa Ferguson is the Director of Research and Conservation at New Jersey's Wetlands Institute. While the crabs spend most of their lives deep underwater, they surface in late spring and early summer to lay their eggs.
So they're depositing eggs into the sand. She has some males that are coming along with her.
An estimated 40 million horseshoe crabs live in the bay, although they can be found all along the Atlantic coast.
Horseshoe crabs have been around for over 450 million years.
Further up the beach, Tony Rose Tablante works with the American Littoral Society.
So there's that sweet spot right here.
Teaching volunteers how to tag select crabs for tracking.
I'm sorry.
Frequently described as living fossils, these resilient, bizarre-looking armored creatures have survived numerous mass extinction events.
They are arthropods, and that's why they're more closely related to scorpions and spiders, and they're not actually crabs.
Horseshoe crab, not a crab.
Horseshoe crab, not a crab.
Not really a horse either.
Yeah.
A female can lay 4,000 eggs a night.
You can see some of the eggs that have washed up and come to the surface. So these
they're tiny.
But only the ones that stay buried in the sand have a chance of hatching. When the tide inevitably unearths the rest, it turns into a feeding frenzy.
So it seems like we're not the only people who know that there are eggs here. It seems like there's some other species that have figured that out.
That's right.
Migratory shorebirds depend on the surface eggs and fly thousands of miles to eat them. Birds like the red knot, which makes a perfectly timed pit stop in the Delaware Bay to refuel on its journey from South America to the Arctic. And where there are birds, there are birders. Seeing this migration in person is a bucket list activity for Jay Bolden. But while birding is just a hobby for him, his professional life is also linked to the crabs.
I just noticed this, actually.
Yeah.
You've got a crab pen?
Yeah, it's been our mascot.
As a senior biologist with the Eli Lilly Company, Bolden is very familiar with a medical marvel flowing underneath the horseshoe crab shells.
This is LAL. This is purified horseshoe crab blood.
Limulus amoebocyte lysate, made from the bright blue blood of horseshoe crabs, is used to detect dangerous endotoxins in medicine.
Have all of us benefited from horseshoe crab blood?
Sure, if you've gotten a vaccine. Anything that comes in contact with that medicine has to be shown to be free of endotoxin.
While bacterial endotoxins can be found everywhere, you don't want to put them straight into your bloodstream. That could make you sick, or potentially even kill you. Horseshoe crab blood reacts to the presence of endotoxins, which is why for decades, LAL has been used to test all sorts of medicines, syringes, and implantable medical devices. Before this method was developed, scientists tested with live rabbits.
Every pharmaceutical company, every manufacturer, everyone's using this?
Anyone making an injectable is using it, so it's widely spread.
The actual collecting and bleeding of crabs is done by LAL manufacturers like Lanza and Charles River Laboratories. While live crabs are returned to the water after their blood is drawn, inevitably some do die in the collection process. But it's difficult to know the total impact.
They throw it in the water and they say, that crab lived. But they have no idea that crab's going to live.
So you're looking for a better procedure then, if they are going to bleed it.
We want better practices. So that's a female.
Wildlife biologist Larry Niles is the co-founder of the Horseshoe Crab Recovery Coalition, which advocates for increased transparency in the bleeding industry. He's been studying crabs since the late 1980s.
How have you seen the crab population decline?
So we best measure that by the eggs, because that's the most direct connection with the birds. And so the eggs have gone down by about 90%.
In the 1990s, there was a bait boom that led to a significant decline after fishermen started using the plentiful horseshoe crabs to catch eels and whelk.
They parked by the beach and just take every crab that was coming ashore. Within 2 years, they were taking 2.5 million crabs a year. And almost right away, our egg density started crashing.
While horseshoe crabs are still used as bait today, the harvest is now better regulated. State by state, there are a patchwork of protections which address bait and bleeding. Still, the Center for Biological Diversity and 22 partner organizations are actively trying to get the horseshoe crab listed as an endangered species, in part due to how many other species, like the threatened red knots, depend on them. The bait industry, significant habitat loss, sea level rise, all pose challenges. At least in the biomedical world, there's change on the horizon.
The reason I'm hopeful is because synthetic is a very important advance.
So you mix these in a certain ratio.
That's where Jay Bolden and his lab come in. Bolden's been working to get Eli Lilly and his colleagues at other companies to use a synthetic alternative to horseshoe crab blood, originally discovered in Singapore.
Is the synthetic just as good as the real deal?
It is. It's the biochemical equivalent.
Eli Lilly's now converted 80% of its testing to use a synthetic product.
I knew the impact of the birds, I knew the impact of the crabs, and it was something that we can make a positive change.
But change doesn't come quickly. Testing old products with new methods requires new regulatory approvals. In the lab, pictures of the crabs and birds remind the scientists why they're making the switch.
Rabbits protected us for 40 years. Horseshoe crabs have protected us for 40 years. 40 years from now, we won't need to be impacting animals to do this test.
In the meantime, every crab counts, which is why Lisa Ferguson and this group of trained volunteers are walking along the Delaware Bay, turning over toppled crabs to help make sure they get back to the water after spawning. The effort is called Return the Favor.
So you feel like they have done us a favor?
They've done us a favor, so we're returning that favor.
With the Republican convention now in the books and next month's Democratic convention ahead in Chicago, it's time for a close-up look at some true party animals. Our Faith Saley has a trunk show.
Last week, there was an elephant in the room, the Republican Party. Formed in 1854, its first president was Abraham Lincoln. The elephant became the party's symbol in part because Civil War soldiers described combat as seeing the elephant. The prodigious pachyderm grew to be all but synonymous with the Grand Old Party after famed satirist Thomas Nast used it in political cartoons in the 1870s. The elephants in this room, however, are not political.
How surprised do you think people would be to find out that elephants were once the size of ponies?
What is an elephant? It's big, right? It's always got to be big, and that's not the case at all. This is one of the smallest that we know of from Sicily.
The Secret World of Elephants, the new exhibit at the American Museum of Natural History in Manhattan, opens our eyes to the diversity of these ancient mammals, like this woolly mammoth that roamed the Americas as far south as Kansas.
They were all over, and in fact, there were probably somewhere between 15 and 17 species living as recently as a few thousand years ago. Now we're down to 3, 2 living in Africa, 1 in South Asia.
To curator Ross McPhee, the appendage that makes the elephant an evolutionary marvel is as plain as the nose on his face.
An elephant's trunk is a nose, an arm, a finger, a communication system?
And a straw.
And a straw! It's the Swiss Army knife of organs.
Yes. It's the most wonderful organ that is evolved in mammalia.
With more than 40,000 muscles, what might get lost is that this powerful proboscis can actually smell, too, way better than any animal we know of. Their trunks can sense water up to 12 miles away and sniff out the only predator elephants really have. Yep, human beings.
They can detect whether a person that they see walking along is likely to be a farmer, because that person is going to have the smell of plants or of earth. Perhaps a hunter. They can smell cartridges. They can smell other things that tell them that that's a dangerous person to be close to.
That danger goes both ways. Living near these creatures can be perilous. But having lost 90% of their former habitat to humans, what are elephants to do?
They're not going to stop just because you've got a nice fence around your maize field. They're going to say, I can eat that, and they're going to go in and destroy the farmer's livelihood. It's hard for us in America to understand that because we don't have elephants on our back doors wanting to eat the peonies.
Does this taste sweet to her? It's sugar cane?
Sugar cane, yep.
Here at the National Zoo in Washington, D.C., there's no danger seeing elephants up close. And to zookeeper Robbie Clark, the 7 Asian elephants are each one of a kind.
I would say Nikki Lindt is brave. Trong Ni is cautious. Swarna, I would say, is calm. Ronnie's fast-paced. She's the go-getter. Bosie's quite loyal when the other elephants give her a chance to be. Our male Spike, I would say, is patient, especially because he does spend a lot of time with our females.
So there is elephant drama?
Yes, there's elephant drama. We could have our own reality TV show. Good girls.
That drama within this close-knit herd is always unfolding, even if we can't hear it. That's because researchers now believe elephants communicate by producing low-frequency rumblings, vibrations that travel through the earth to other elephants miles away.
And other elephants will then accept that message through their toenails into their inner ear. And I've noticed as we've been standing here that she's talking to perhaps the other elephants right now. I can see it on top of her forehead right here when she's sending it out. Trunk.
Exactly what she's saying remains a mystery to Clark.
Steady. All right.
But he's all ears.
They were all gathering at the watering hole to drink.
The crowds back in New York are paying attention too. For such a large and revered animal, it's amazing how little we know about elephants. Uncovering their secrets and learning to coexist might be the only way we can keep them safe.
These are the most remarkable beasts on the planet. They deserve special protections, and they deserve a special place in our pantheon of animals that we can't do without.
This morning, we're going fishing with Elizabeth Palmer.
Just a hint of food can start a feeding frenzy at the Niigata Koi Museum.
They look fierce and determined, partly beautiful and partly scenes from a nightmare.
They can't bite, though. Their teeth are way back in their throats. In fact, koi carp are loved and admired, especially for their size and bright markings. With the right food and care, they can live for decades. In traditional Japanese art, they are graceful symbols of luck and longevity. Originally, wild koi were nothing like these. They were mostly black and used for food in the Japanese countryside. But about 100 years ago, farmers began to breed them to bring out the colored markings. What began as a hobby became big business. Japan exported almost $50 million worth of koi last year.
It's almost like magic, you can say, to create a fish like this. And then
Ben Plonsky is president of Laguna Koi Ponds of California and a judge at the annual All Japan Koi Show in Tokyo. Basically, it's a fish beauty pageant that draws connoisseurs from all over the world. This yard-long female won Best in Show.
So when you were judging this, what were you looking for and what impressed you? Size, I get it.
It's a fish first, so it has to have good body conformation and you can say bone structure.
And of course, those colored splotches.
And the pattern needs to fit the fish like on the face area. It needs to be like a cute face, maybe a hat or a beret, something kind of cute and unique because this is his face. This is where he greets you. So this is what you first see and fall in love with is their face.
In winter, snow blankets the mud ponds of Nishigata in northern Japan, where baby koi start out. But breeder Shigeyoshi Tanaka has moved them, now mature, safely indoors.
Do you have a favorite?
Oh, many favorites in here.
In Japanese, they're called nishikigoi, brocaded carp, like swimming jewels.
Just try to touch.
But they're simpler to admire than to wrangle.
She don't like it.
She doesn't like me.
But she definitely knew a safe pair of hands. Tanaka's koi are famous, and a group of buyers from Thailand have arrived to make an order. Once upon a time, most koi customers were Japanese. No longer. These days, many of the best fish will be shipped to the U.S., which is the second largest koi importer in the world. Why is that? Partly it's space. America, unlike Japan, has room for koi fish ponds.
She's cute.
But there's something else. Just ask Ben Plonsky.
Come here, look at baby. They're so gentle. There's plenty of people who love dogs and love cats and a lot of people who love fish.
Seduced by that old koi charisma.
Bats are as scary a symbol of Halloween as you can imagine. But when you see them up close, it turns out they're really more amazing than frightening, as Connor Knighton will show us.
Deep in the heart of Texas, deep inside a cave, millions and millions of Mexican free-tailed bats roost together. 1 square foot of this ceiling can contain more than 500 of them. When it comes to bat colonies, it turns out everything really is bigger in Texas.
So Bracken Cave is the home to the largest colony of bats in the world. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 million Mexican free-tailed bats.
Fran Hutchins is the director of Bat Conservation International at Bracken Cave Preserve, located just outside the city of San Antonio.
They'll all be coming out for dinner here in an hour or so.
Bats can be found all throughout the Lone Star State. The ones that roost under the South Congress Bridge in Austin have even become a tourist attraction.
It's something that's just extremely unique to Austin, and it's just cool.
But there's nothing quite like Bracken.
So what we'll see tonight, we call it a batnado. So this sinkhole behind us is going to fill full of this vortex of bats.
When the bats emerge from the cave to feed each evening, the resulting batnado is so massive it shows up on Doppler radar. They're headed out to surrounding fields to spend the night feasting on insects that feast on crops like corn and cotton. Bats are a natural form of pest control.
So farmers love bats?
Yeah, farmers love bats.
I'd say the rest of the world doesn't necessarily.
They're not sure about bats, so that's part of it. Is that a lot of people, what they know about bats is whatever horror movie they saw last.
In pop culture, bats are depicted as terrifying bloodsuckers.
My bats passed away. Bats frighten me.
Even Batman is afraid of bats. But one wealthy Texas entrepreneur fell in love with the Bracken bats, inspiring him to pull a Bruce Wayne and build his own bat cave.
After seeing the one down at Bracken Cave, it just knocked me over. I said, that is something.
David Bamberger co-founded fast food chain Church's Texas Chicken. In the late 1990s, concerned about threats to the bat's natural habitat in Texas, he built a giant cave on his sprawling ranch Sela near Johnson City. And then, for a long time, no bats showed up. But CBS's Jim Axelrod did.
This is $170,000 if you went out and tried to do it.
So when Bamberger builds the world's largest man-made bat cave, his wallet keeps him from sweating what is so far a $170,000 batless bust.
The millionaire who'd gone batty was big news at the time. The cave was a colossal flop. Until one night, when Bamberger heard the flapping of thousands of tiny wings.
Bats were pouring out of there by the thousands. Tears are running down my face. Like, oh, I'm so happy.
Today, Bamberger's cave, which he's dubbed the Chiroptorium, bats are members of the order Chiroptera, meaning handwing, is home to a couple 100,000 bats, part of his larger conservation-focused preserve. It's impressive. Romantic, even.
Well, our first date was a beautiful Sunday afternoon. Would you care to come and see my bat cave?
Wait, that was the first date?
Yes.
And so what's a gal say to that?
She says, at my age, I've had every come on in my life, but I've never been asked to see a bat cave before.
Bamberger is a 95-year-old newlywed. He married Joanna Reese Bamberger earlier this year. The two still come out to see the bats most evenings.
You sit there absolutely agog because it's just wonderful to look at.
How's it going up?
Looking at the faces of these high schoolers on a field trip to Bracken Cave, you don't see fear, you see awe.
The fun part is watching people that have never seen a bat flight or a bat this close. It can be very emotional for some people.
The majority of these Mexican free-tailed bats will be back in Mexico soon to spend the winter. They won't return to Texas to have their babies until sometime next spring, when they will continue to delight.
Look at them go.
Instead of fright.
Time was, beavers were indeed the makings of fur coats to protect against the cold. But there's a lot more to the beaver than that. Turns out, eager is an understatement. Here's Luke Burbank.
Leela Phillip remembers the exact moment it happened. She was walking her dog near her home in Connecticut.
And we were about right over there, and she froze. And next thing I knew, there was this crack. I thought a gun had gone off.
The sound was actually a beaver, slapping its tail on the water to let her know she was in its neighborhood.
I looked and I saw, oh my God, it's filling with water. And then I saw trees were coming down over there. It was just incredible. It was one of the most amazing things I'd ever seen. And it was the beavers making their pond.
That was the moment Phillip went from not thinking about beavers very much to becoming more or less obsessed. The result, her book, Beaverland, How One Weird Rodent Made America.
It's just incredible, the change that they bring into the land. And this is why they're called ecosystem engineers.
And in creating their own ecosystems, beavers actually do a lot for humans, slowing down water flow and creating wider, wetter environments.
It's so dry out there, that's fuel, like that is fire fuel. And then you get into here and, I mean, the water, it's not gonna burn.
Emily Fairfax is assistant professor at the University of Minnesota, where she studies beavers, often in the bone-dry and sometimes wildfire-prone West.
If you look at these plants, if you pinch them, they are so full of water. The tissues are green and lush, and they're not withering, they're not crinkly, and like that's hard to burn. You don't want to start a fire with wet material, and this is obviously very wet.
You're pretty certain there are beavers here because, of course, we have a dam, we have a lodge, but we also have, what did you just find?
I just found a beaver poop. And so these really highlight what beavers eat and what they don't eat, because if you look carefully, it's just plant material. It's just sawdust, like a little sawdust marshmallow, and it's pretty fresh. So we know the beavers have been here working recently because they're leaving poops in the water.
You really just handed me a beaver turd?
I did.
Now I'm holding
Welcome to the field.
Kind of woody.
Yeah.
Fairfax says if we could see the California of 500 years ago with plentiful beaver, we'd see a greener landscape that would burn less easily.
Pre-European fur trade, the estimate is that there were between 100 million and 400 million beavers in North America. And for perspective, that's like about a beaver per kilometer of habitable stream. And that's like squirrels. They were everywhere.
But beaver fur was incredibly valuable to the Western explorers of North America.
Beaver felt was the Gore-Tex of its day. Everybody needed a beaver hat. You need to think of Mr. Darcy in London with the top hat. George Washington with his tricorn hat. That was made out of beaver felt. Beaver felt was incredibly valuable.
Native Americans hunted beaver, but in a way that allowed their populations to still thrive. That all changed when John Jacob Astor landed in New York.
John Jacob Astor comes over, his famous story of him coming over with 7 flutes, thinking he's going to start a music business. He overhears on board this ship people talking about fantastic sums they can make trading this item in London that they can get in North America for nothing. And he figures out it's beaver, and that's the beginning of America's first multimillionaire.
In just 100 years, the population of North American beaver dropped to near extinction levels, leading to all kinds of attempts to rebuild their numbers, including some truly bizarre ideas.
The plane makes a careful approach, ready for the drop.
In the 1950s, Idaho wildlife officials launched Operation Geronimo, parachuting almost 80 beavers into the backcountry, hoping they'd repopulate. And sure enough, it and other less high-flying reintroduction efforts seem to be working, according to Layla Phillip.
The beaver is one of North America's great success stories. They're a conservation comeback story, and that's why we have beavers now. And beavers have this great new role to play because they can help us with every environmental problem we have that's being accelerated by climate change, fire and drought and flood.
That's right. It may seem counterintuitive, but beaver dams actually reduce catastrophic flooding by sending more water into the ground. Still, of course, not everyone loves a beaver pond springing up on their property or near their kids' baseball field, but there are non-lethal ways to coexist with our furry neighbors, says Phillip, like something called a pond leveler.
Well, it's really beautifully simple. You basically put a pipe through the dam. It's like a permanent leak in the dam, and you lower the level of the pond.
Meanwhile, back at that original pond, the one that got Layla Phillip so obsessed, those beavers have moved on, leaving behind an ecosystem better than they found it. Something we humans might do well to consider ourselves.
Even this beaver meadow is so much richer with life and more full of water than before. So it's pretty remarkable.
So how much do we really know about the celestial spectacle we call lightning? David Pogue is here to illuminate.
Oh, it's coming right for Sierra Vista. Let's hope it holds together. Oh, there it is.
But there's a little something.
Hi, Storm.
Did you see what's on top?
Arizona photographer Lori Bailey is tracking a lightning storm.
I have to admit, I enjoy feeling the atmospheric energy when you get close to lightning. It's kind of a natural high.
It's not easy to photograph something that's visible for only a few millionths of a second. Let's see that again. It occurs to me you have 3 cameras going.
I do.
How are you going to go click, click, click in time to catch the lightning?
This sensor is what clicks the shutter, because Lori's brain is just too slow to say there's the lightning.
But there's more to this profession than automated camera triggers and a lot of patience. You also need
that last little thing, right? Luck. You can do everything right and still not have the cards fall in your favor.
When conditions do go her way, the results are spectacular. She posts them online.
When people say, hey, what do you do? I study lightning. Oh, really? And there's always a story.
Philip Bitzer is a lightning physicist at the University of Alabama in Huntsville.
I remember when I was in first grade, my parents explained that lightning happens when clouds rub against each other. I'm guessing the science is a little more elaborate.
That's not too far off base. There is something that rubs and sort of connects with each other. It's not two clouds rubbing together.
Inside a storm cloud, millions of tiny ice crystals collide with slushy hail droplets. The ice crystals blow upward with a positive charge. The slush droplets drift downward with a negative charge. Eventually, an electrical discharge results in a bolt of lightning. It usually stays inside the cloud or hops from cloud to cloud, but the bolts that most interest people are the ones that shoot down to the ground, or seem to.
You know, we talk about misconceptions. Does lightning go up or down? And it starts with stuff that comes out of the cloud, but that stuff that comes out of the cloud, it's so dim you don't make it out with your eye. But the part that you see actually comes from the ground and goes up to the cloud.
A lightning bolt is about the width of your thumb, as bright as 100 million light bulbs, and 5 times as hot as the surface of the sun.
It will superheat the air right around it, and eventually that superheat will cool off and relax into this acoustical wave that we all know as thunder. So you can't have thunder without the lightning.
You know what's fun about interviewing a lightning physicist? You can get to the bottom of all those traditional lightning tropes, like lightning never strikes twice in the same place.
So it absolutely does. And often what will happen is a single lightning flash, it can hit 3 to 5 times in the same place.
Or lightning always strikes the tallest point.
So that's another misnomer. It doesn't have to hit the tallest object. You know, I often say, lightning's already traveled a couple miles from the cloud to the ground. At that point, it's going to go where it wants to go.
We think of lightning striking as being very rare. People always say, you have a better chance of getting struck by lightning than...
Somewhere around 45 times every second around the world, you'll get lightning. 45 times a second.
All told, about 1.4 billion bolts hit the Earth each year, numbers that are expected to rise as the planet warms. And about 250,000 times a year, lightning hits people.
I remember the sound. It just sounded like it was a bomb going off. It was almost deafening. And my vision was slow motion.
In 2015, a sudden storm interrupted a school soccer game in North Carolina.
Can you put your head down?
Teacher Shauna Turner sought shelter in the doorway of this shed. But when lightning struck a nearby light pole, millions of volts coursed through the ground and into her body.
I love to watch them run.
I know.
Like the vast majority of human lightning strikes, it was an indirect hit.
At that point, right when the sound was, I was thrown to the ground. Within about a minute, my arm, it felt like it was boiling in my arm. It eventually went to where my feet were tingling. And, within the first couple of weeks of class, I couldn't remember some of my students' names.
Lightning strikes often lead to memory issues, heart problems, and even personality changes. After all, your brain and your heart are electrical systems.
Come here. There was one instance where I went to call in a student's name and I couldn't come up with it. So I just turned to the board and, tears rolling. I was trying to keep it away so my students didn't see it, trying to choke it back. And he came up to me and he hugged me and he said, "You can call me anything you want."
There wasn't much doctors could do.
All I kept hearing was, "This is the strangest thing I've ever seen," or "What you're describing doesn't make sense."
Eventually, she found a group of lightning survivors on Facebook.
That's when I started to figure out that I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only one having these symptoms. I wasn't crazy.
This is called the invisible disease. They cannot see the neuropathy and how my feet go from burning hot to freezing cold, and sometimes I can't even walk.
The group gets together twice a year.
Where's my girl?
And Turner has never missed a meeting.
Oh, love you. I needed this so bad.
Now, if you want to minimize your chances of getting hit by lightning, go indoors or stay in your car.
When thunder roars, go indoors. There's a reason why we say that.
Still, the biggest threat isn't lightning hitting people. It's lightning starting fires.
Most forest fires are caused by humans, but most damage is done by lightning-caused wildfires. Usually because when lightning happens, it's not near a campground where you know it happened. It happens in some remote location that you may not know that the fire started right away.
Thunder and lightning were the weapons of Zeus, the most powerful god of all.
We may no longer believe that Zeus hurls lightning down from Mount Olympus when he's irritated, but there's still a lot we don't know.
Everybody thinks lightning, well, you must understand it happens all the time. Like, and yet we don't.
I mean, I guess it's hard, right? Like, you can't really put a lightning bolt on your desk.
Right. The stuff that we see only lasts for, maybe a millisecond.
Our best hope is to build instruments. In fact, Philip Bitzer himself helped develop a lightning camera that's on the space station at this moment.
And we're sitting above the Earth, looking down, just looking for these little blips of light sitting on top of clouds.
Is there any practical value toward mapping the lightning and how it happens, or is it just kind of neat?
We know that lightning will ramp up as a precursor to severe weather often, and so we can watch the lightning activity start to increase or start to jump. We've also been able to use it to help aviation. We can route planes around storms that are electrically active.
This is where I got a grasp on all the symptoms from the strike, so I'm holding on to the lightning bolt.
Back here on Earth, Shauna Turner is still fighting to recover from her lightning strike 8 years ago.
I mean, obviously the brain damage will never get any better, but I've learned how to do other things to assist with it. So I'm not going to let it stop me. If I let it stop me, it wins.
And in Arizona, 2 days after our visit, photographer Lori Bailey got some of that good luck she'd been chasing.
Oh, my goodness, giant bolts! Oh, baby, wow! Woo-hoo! Oh my goodness, that was fantastic! This is where you feel alive and where you feel the energy of Mother Nature.
Martha Teichner this morning shares a very special pigtail.
Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs, Nigel, Livy, and Rain. Because this isn't that tale. There's no blowing down of houses and no big bad wolf. But there is a fairy godmother, as we shall see. But first, Nigel's backstory.
He was the size of a loaf of Wonder Bread. And he was pink and the most delicious little creature you have ever seen.
When they got him in 2016, life coach Nancy Steiner and her husband, writer David Michaelis, were told Nigel was a so-called teacup pig, 40 pounds max full grown.
It really went from love at first sight to a full-blown love affair. We loved him, and the bigger he got, the more we loved him.
And he did get bigger. And bigger. And bigger.
I would give him a treat for getting out of bed, which was Tempur-Pedic. And I would give him a treat for leaving his room, which was air-conditioned. I'd give him a treat for going outside.
Nigel weighed over 250 pounds. He couldn't stand up.
By age 3, so much fat had grown over his eyes, Nigel couldn't see.
Obesity is a big problem.
Enter Susan Magidson, the fairy godmother in this story.
Can obesity kill a pig?
Yes. It certainly is proven to shorten their life expectancy by 6 to 10 years.
Magidson came and collected Nigel and drove him 3 hours to Ross Mill Farm, the potbelly pig sanctuary she runs in Pennsylvania, where he's been ever since. Michaelis and Steiner visit him regularly. Magidson put Nigel on a diet and discovered he had an aptitude.
Nigel, where's your babies, huh? Oh, here, look at that. He's a boy, he's not a mama. But, you know, Nigel has been a really good surrogate mother for babies.
You've heard that term, hog heaven? Ross Mill Farm is it. There are pigs everywhere. Big ones, little ones, kitschy ones. Susan Magidson started out breeding potbelly pigs, but pretty soon shifted to rescuing them when it became clear how many people fall out of love with their pigs.
So is there such a thing as a teacup pig?
No, not at all.
I bet you didn't know pot-bellied pigs are crazy about Cheerios. Or how about this? Males can reproduce at 2 months old, females at 4 months. They keep growing until the age of 5 years. Susan Magidson has advice for anyone considering a pig as a pet. Take her webinar. Find out what you're getting into.
I'm trying to keep people from getting them, but there are pig people who are in love with this species.
Which is where Vivi and Rain come in.
My daughter was really excited. She's like, come on, you have to come upstairs to your room. You have to see what I got you for your birthday.
It was 2014, and respiratory therapist Veronique Peterson was not expecting what her daughter had hidden in her bed.
So she pulled the covers back, and there was a pig in my bed. And I was thinking, why would you get me a pig?
Vivi grew on her in every way. One weekend, her daughter borrowed Vivi and took the pig camping. It disappeared. So she went out and bought one of Vivi's litter mates, thinking her mother wouldn't notice the switch.
So when I got home and I saw this other pig, I was just not happy about it at all. And I cried.
She posted flyers, and sure enough, campers spotted Vivi.
They said we did get Cheerios because on my flyer, I said she loves Cheerios.
She was caught, and Veronique took her home. The second pig, named Rain, stayed. Now you have to understand that Veronique Peterson also has, count them, a cat, a fish, a tortoise, and 3 dogs. So when her house burned down over a year ago, she had a problem. She sent the pigs off to Ross Mill Farm while she looked for a place to live until her house could be rebuilt. A landlord actually agreed to rent to her.
Spin. Good girl, baby. Here you go.
Sisters Vivi and Rain have their own room. We showed up this last year on what happened to be their 8th birthday. Their treat? The best-looking fruit salad any pig could ever want. Just as in that other 3 Little Pigs story, there's a moral here. Pigs are not for everybody. But for some people and pigs, there are happy endings.
Why is it all worth it?
I love them.
In no small number of ways, what's old is new again. As proof, consider this postcard from the British county of West Sussex from David Pogue.
For over 200 years, Charlie Burrell's family has lived in Knepp Castle,
Anyway, so here's some of the...
about an hour from London.
So that's the guy that built the castle, and he married an heiress. Look at her. She was an heiress and very beautiful, and there she was marrying this boring academic with no money.
The castle sits on 3,500 acres of land.
I'm the 10th baronet.
And does that carry with it certain rights and responsibilities?
Not really, no. I mean, in certain circles it would.
But he was responsible for the estate and the farm when he inherited them in 1983.
It's so hard to remember.
For 17 years, he and his wife, Isabella Tree, tried everything to compete with modern industrial farms.
The spraying, the new technologies and new crops that were coming on.
But the wet, heavy clay in the soil made efficient farming impossible.
We were £1.5 million in debt by then. So it was really looking desperate.
And then, in 2000, they learned about a new idea in land management called rewilding. That's where you give away your land to nature. You stop plowing, irrigating, mowing, applying chemicals, and you let wilderness return.
What has been absolutely astonishing is how quickly nature has bounced back. So from being one of the most depleted sort of pieces of land you can imagine to being one of the most important biodiversity hotspots in the UK.
After 20 years, NEP now teems with an incredible variety of plants, animals, birds, and insects, some of them endangered.
The rarest species in Britain, turtle doves, nightingales, purple emperor butterflies. We have peregrine falcons nesting in a tree, which is almost unheard of.
What I wanted to see was the first breeding storks to be back in Britain for 600 years. And there they are.
So that stork would not have been here when you guys arrived?
No, the last time storks nested in the UK successfully was 1416, the year after the Battle of Agincourt. He is king of the castle.
Oh, man.
To kickstart the transformation, the couple introduced a few heavy critters like cattle, horses, and pigs.
They rootle, they trample, they debark trees. The way they spread seeds from one area to another in their hooves, their fur, and their gut. If you put these animals back into a landscape, they can create habitats again.
Take, for example, this ancient breed, Old English Longhorns, where generations of the same family roam free.
So the great-great-great-great-grandmother will be there, and then all the daughters...
Excuse me, we're working here? So, do you feed them anything?
No supplementary feeding. They're just finding whatever they need from this landscape.
Some of these cows will become beef for sale. Burl and Tree say they produce tastier meat because of their natural diet.
Cows don't just eat grass. They eat plants and twigs and leaves. Once they're eating what nature intended them to eat, they metabolize much, much better.
In the wood, over there.
A few minutes later, we came across these red deer enjoying some shade.
Those antlers are pretty incredible.
Aren't they amazing? To us, they look really outlandish on a red deer, but that is probably naturally what they would grow to if they were allowed to live in their most optimal kind of habitat. Quite often we see them just submerged in water.
So if I read about a red deer in a book, it might not note that they are river creatures.
Exactly, exactly. It's only when you allow rewilding for habitats to naturally emerge that then you have species showing their innate natural behaviors.
So in some ways, what we're seeing here is what we might have seen 1,000 years ago.
Maybe 10,000 years ago.
The pigs are also changing the landscape by starting a chain reaction.
There's Mum.
Oh my gosh. These are hairy pigs.
The pig, by its rootling and its opening up of the ground, has allowed things like sallow, which is a food plant of purple emperor butterfly, to then flourish.
And to top it off, the Knepp estate now generates more money as a wilderness than it ever did as a farm.
We have ecotourism, tree houses and glamping and camping and African safaris, and that's now a business that brings in about $1 million a year.
The rewilded land does a favor for surrounding farms too.
It's going to provide clean water, it provides that crop with pollinating insects, it's going to provide physical buffers against extreme weather events.
Down the road, with what's happening to climate and what's happening to biodiversity loss, we need to have hotspots for nature, we need to have corridors running through our landscapes for nature.
The Knepp story is a big deal in the UK. The couple has just published a guide to rewilding, and the British government is funding additional rewilding programs, thanks in part to Alistair Driver.
We've got an ambition in Rewilding Britain of 5% of the country by 2030. About a foot down in here.
He's the director of Rewilding Britain, a nonprofit devoted to attracting more government dollars and more landowners to rewilding.
We know that 56% of our species are declining. We have a biodiversity crisis. We have a climate emergency. I mean, we've got to do something different. We cannot continue the way we are.
Today, rewilding projects are underway in more than 30 countries around the world.
Most of the countries where rewilding is going on are those countries which have inadvertently screwed things up for wildlife. We need to start reversing this decline where man and nature can work more together in harmony.
Rewilding may be the future of the Napa state, but it's a huge break from the past. What would he say if he knew that you'd taken the farm he labored to create and let it go to seed?
Yeah. So I think we're very pragmatic in this family.
So from the pragmatic standpoint, he might have said, dude, you've doubled the estate's income.
I'm not sure word dude would come into his sort of 18th century brain, but you know, I get your meaning. Dude.
They're among our most endangered creatures, fighting to find their way back. Lee Cowan shares an inspiring tale of survival.
At first glance, this can look like a morgue.
Poor guy.
Sea turtles, limp and motionless. But if you look close enough, what might look like a corpse offers a slow glimpse of life. Those turtles all washed up in Massachusetts this past December on the windy beaches of Cape Cod Bay. They were nearly frozen to death.
The turtles, especially today, 38 degrees, if that turtle sits out for 2 or 3 hours, it's going to die. It's just not going to recover from that kind of shock from the cold.
The problem, though, isn't so much the cold as it is our ever-warming oceans.
This has been the hottest spot for turtles, too, and yeah.
Biologist Bob Prescott,
so we'll close it up.
Director Emeritus of the Massachusetts Audubon Wildlife Sanctuary in Wellfleet, says the Gulf of Maine, which includes Cape Cod Bay, is now one of the fastest warming bodies of ocean water in the world. Now, turtles like warm water, but they're staying up here too long. By mid-November, the temperatures start to drop too fast for these cold-blooded reptiles to handle, and volunteers are finding more and more of them washed ashore.
You see the movement in the flipper?
In a hypothermic state like this.
How's he doing? Can you tell?
This time of year, you can't tell.
It's called cold stunning.
They may come in looking dead, they revive, they go up to the aquarium, and a couple of days later they crash. We'll put them in the box, and that'll start to get them stabilized.
All sea turtles are in real trouble, but by far the worst off are these, Kemp's Ridley turtles, the most critically endangered sea turtle in the world. Since the 70s, they've been washing ashore, about a few dozen per year.
The first turtle I found was 1974.
But these days, Prescott says,
now, we're up over 750, 760 turtles, and it started a month ago.
They've traveled a long way, unwittingly into danger. Their nesting grounds are thousands of miles to the south, along the warm beaches of the Gulf of Mexico.
What we're looking for is the tracks left in the sand.
Where Donna Shaver has spent her life trying to help the species rebound.
If we don't help save this species, we lose a piece that enriches us.
How big are the eggs themselves?
The eggs are about the size of ping pong.
She's the head of the Turtle Rescue Group at Padre Island National Seashore in Texas.
There's a whole variety of things that can harm them, from oil spills to boat strikes to red tide, entanglement and debris, ingestion debris, all of those.
Which is why all that urgent care they're getting back up north,
all right, little buddy,
is more important than ever.
Let's get your picture taken.
Most have at least some degree of pneumonia.
There's definitely a little bit of fluid in the lungs here.
Some are so bad they have to be put on ventilators just to breathe. But they're also suffering from a lot of other things, fractured bones and dehydration, for example.
He's okay. He came in yesterday, so he's still pretty early in the treatment process.
This is the Animal Care Center for the New England Aquarium, a state-of-the-art facility just outside Boston that specializes in treating cold-stunned sea turtles from Massachusetts to Maine. They have an 80% success rate at bringing these turtles back from the brink.
It's moving a little, huh?
This Kemp's Ridley came in with barely 1 heartbeat a minute.
Anything? No.
But biologist Adam Kennedy says for such a small marine turtle, they are remarkably resilient.
Because of this, they will likely give another round of epinephrine, probably atropine as well.
Treatment can last up to 2 years, but Kennedy can really only manage between 40 and 80 turtles long term. And with the warming waters, hundreds are now getting trapped every year, and that's just too many four-flippered patients for any one rehab to oversee. It's basically a mass casualty event. They need other hospitals to help. But that left Bob Prescott with a question.
How do you get a turtle from here to there?
The answer? Give turtles a ticket to fly.
A happy reptile makes for a good passenger.
Ken Andrews is vice president of a unique nonprofit called Turtles Fly 2.
This is in a lot of ways like a life flight.
It is a life flight. It's a medevac flight, absolutely.
Turtles may not be meant to have their heads in the clouds, but there really is no other option.
There's no agency, there's no staffing, there's no funding, there's nothing there to make this mission happen, and these turtles will die if somebody like Turtles Fly 2 doesn't jump in to help.
It could never happen unless hundreds of pilots were willing to volunteer their time, their planes, and their fuel to rush the rescued turtles to willing rehab facilities all around the country.
Where do you guys get your funding?
Yeah, what funding? I wish. We desperately need it. Our pilots that are flying these missions are pulling $1 million out of their pocket to fly these missions every year for us.
On this particular mission, Ken, with his dad as co-pilot, will fly more than 2,000 miles from Boston to Atlanta, then on to Gulfport, and finally Dallas, dropping off 44 sick sea turtles along the way in hopes that one day they'll be well enough to be released.
All right, I've got some temps for you guys.
90% of the turtles that we've moved to rehab have ended up back in the ocean.
Wow.
Yeah, overall, everything was good. All right, good, buddy, get out of here.
These lucky passengers landed at the Texas Sea Life Center in Corpus Christi, Texas, back in 2021, courtesy of Turtles Fly 2.
Could you do this without them?
We could not do this without their help, no question. You ready to go, huh? I think so, yeah.
Veterinarian Tim Tristan, the director here, says it took a while, but with good care and the help of volunteers, these turtles are now finally ready to go home again.
If they can make it through our front door, we have a pretty good success rate with getting them turned around and getting them back out to the wild where they belong. You seen a sea turtle before?
A crowd gathered at the beach of Padre Island.
Oh my gosh, they're so handsome.
Most never get to see a Kemp's Ridley turtle. There are far too few.
Everybody wants to see some turtles released, right? All right.
But on this day, there were a few more. Biologist Donna Shaver says this release is modern conservation in action.
They take with me their hopes for the next generation.
There are few privileges that I have ever been offered.
Look at this.
Quite like this one.
How cool. Look, buddy, you're going home.
We humans have not always been kind to the sea and those who dwell in it.
All right, buddy, go home, bud.
But on this day, it was humans. Certainly not me, but the hundreds of veterinarians, biologists, volunteers, and yes, pilots, who all came together to give these critically endangered sea turtles what they rarely get: a second chance. Who says you can't go home again?
For owls these days, wisdom isn't enough because outsmarting climate change and habitat loss is no small challenge. Connor Knighton introduces us to a man who spent a lifetime trying to help.
This sprawling site near Hermiston, Oregon, was once an active Army depot. Built in 1941, it eventually became known as the Umatilla Chemical Depot. Deadly agents like sarin gas were housed in rows of concrete bunkers you can still see from the air. But you have to be at ground level to notice all of the burrows. This land is home to around 50 pairs of burrowing owls.
They have to have burrows for protection, for nesting. I mean, their life revolves around burrows.
David H. Johnson's life revolves around owls. He claims he didn't have much say in the matter.
I didn't pick owls, they picked me.
When Johnson was just 11 years old, an eastern screech owl landed on the edge of his tent, and he was captivated.
We're going to set 2 traps out here.
Today, he's the director of the Global Owl Project.
There are 2 important days in your life, the day you're born and the day you find out why. I'm here to help owls and conservation of the planet and the people that I care about.
Unlike most owl species, which nest in trees, burrowing owls live underground, often in holes left behind by other creatures like badgers or prairie dogs, or humans. To restore this land's dwindling owl population, Johnson has been creating and installing artificial burrows here since 2008.
You can tell it's a male because a female will have this really huge brood patch.
It's given him an opportunity to study the owls, banding them, recording their vocalizations, tracking migrations with small locator devices.
The science of owls is just vast and fascinating. We've been studying these birds for a very long time, but it's really only recently that we've had the kind of advances in technology, the breakthroughs that have allowed us to solve some of the mysteries that have been around for centuries.
Author Jennifer Ackerman included Johnson's research in her new book, What an Owl Knows.
Wood ducks are falling in over here. They just splashed down.
I met up with Ackerman at an owl prowl in Indiana, where owl enthusiasts spend an evening wandering around in the darkness, looking and listening for the elusive creatures.
Did y'all hear the barred owl?
It's this combination of the strange and the familiar that I think makes people just obsess about owls. And we have been obsessing as a species about owls for tens of thousands of years.
More than 30,000 years ago, this owl portrait was scratched into the wall of France's Chauvet-Pont d'Arc cave. More recently, owls have popped up in everything from Tootsie Pop commercials.
How many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Pop? Let's find out.
To Harry Potter.
Right, smart bird you got there, Mr. Potter.
Humans have a great imagination, and we project it on owls in all kinds of different ways. You know, someone's going to get sick or die, or they have wisdom. You know, they're just owls, and they're doing what they do best.
For the past decade, Johnson has been studying how cultures all across the world view owls. Are they wise spirits, or are they eerie messengers of death? Through the Global Owl Project, his team has conducted around 6,000 interviews in 28 countries, talking to residents about their beliefs and documenting examples of owl imagery.
Owls are mysterious. When you see an owl, you realize the owl's been watching you for quite a while already. Sure. And it kind of gives you the heebie-jeebies because, like, you know, I'm just seeing this now, and it's been watching me the whole time. So that scares some people. We're going to put this on.
For Andrew Wildbill, wildlife manager with the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, the burrowing owl holds a special significance.
These burrowing owls are highly important to our tribal culture, and we recognize them as being a very important animal in this ecosystem.
The Army recently transferred thousands of acres of the former depot back to the tribes. The owls are thriving once again on this site, and Johnson is handing off his research project to the tribes as well. He's fighting stage 4 colon cancer and needs to focus on his treatment.
All right.
Around the leg.
Yep.
Close to the chest.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Hey, buddy.
But he's going to keep fighting for owls. There are more than 260 species found all across the globe.
I wish I could do as much as I could for everything on Earth. Yeah, I can't. What I can do is I can help owls. I'm going to work with owls until my last breath.
Listen up. Serena Altschul has a story about the sounds that surround us.
Along the water's edge, Nikki Lindt patiently waits for her subject to sound. She's here in Long Island City, across the water from Manhattan, for the hum of the ferry and the wind blowing through the grass.
Do people come up to you and just say, what are you doing?
I think people would be more likely if I didn't have my headset on, but sometimes somebody will wait. I can tell they really want to know, and I love sharing the work.
That work is multimedia sound art. Exploring a hidden universe most of us rarely experience or even think about, like under a stream or in the soil.
Underground, it's really resonant. It's almost, I would compare it in a way to a drum. It just carries sound in this really beautiful, deep, dramatic, mysterious way.
Here's what we might typically hear out walking in the woods. And here is what Lindt is able to capture with her subterranean microphones. A tree creaking. An acorn falling.
Just to spend time with a tree and like learn this whole other thing about it that I didn't know before, what it sounds like inside. It creates a connection for me.
Come rain, sleet, or snow, Lindt records sounds all over the Northeast.
Do you still find surprises and things that are unexpected?
When I put my microphone under thawing icicles and they were hitting the ground, it really, really sounds like music. It's got that beat. I was like mesmerized.
She started as a visual artist, but during a trip to Alaska 4 years ago to paint permafrost thawing, her ears perked up.
The sounds are almost like meditative, but then at the same time relentless. And you realize what it is, so that's very, very scary.
A project starts with a few microphones and a deep-rooted curiosity.
I'm going to be putting a hydrophone in the water in different areas, and you'll hear the difference in the sounds in different parts of the stream.
Is this your happy place?
Oh, absolutely.
It just transports you. You're just not here. And immediately I have to smile.
Yeah. That's how I feel too.
Yeah.
We're all interconnected as all kinds of species. And that becomes much more apparent when you slow down and become part of the surrounding around yourself. The excitement and opportunity to
A sentiment Nikki Lindt is hoping to share. From now until next May, visitors to Brooklyn's Prospect Park can tune in to some of her underground recordings taken throughout the seasons here and in other areas of New York as part of a sound walk.
The walk is about a mile, and actually here's one of the signs.
Oh, nice. How many are there?
There are 8 stops along the route.
So next time you stop to smell the roses, remember to stop and listen too.
Are you always thinking about, wonder what it sounds like under this rock? I wonder what it sounds like inside that tree.
Absolutely. It's completely changed when I walk around and the wind blows and I see a bunch of grasses move in the wind. And it's just so magical. Like there's this whole frontier right under our feet.
We set aside the 4th of July as a day to come together, to honor these United States. Of course, our differences are many these days. If only, as Leslie Stahl suggests, we could follow the lead of some of our fellow animals down on the farm.
In the leafy pine barrens of southern New Jersey lies a very different kind of farm.
So for those people who have never been here, never even heard of the funny farm, how would you describe it?
I say heaven on earth, especially for animals.
and for people, because when you walk through the gates, you can feel the inner peace and harmony because they all get along here.
They do. It's kind of astonishing.
The Astonishing Funny Farm, a not-for-profit animal sanctuary open to the public 2 days a week, was created by New Jersey's own Dr. Doolittle, Laurie Zaleski.
We have a mommy sheep and a baby sheep.
This is basically a farm for rescued animals. Most of them, were they abused?
Abused, unwanted, neglected, elderly, disabled. Every single animal here is a rescue.
So you've been healing them as well as protecting them?
Yes.
She's healed and protected more than 600 animals over the last 20 years, from retired racehorses to raucous roosters.
We have 115 roosters.
Well, no wonder it's so noisy around
It is very
here.
noisy.
Listen, you. Hey, why'd you name it Funny Farm? Why didn't you name it Heaven on Earth or whatever?
So my mother had the original Funny Farm, and she said it's full of animals and fit for lunatics.
The people are the lunatics.
As she writes in her book, there are lessons here for our polarized, at-each-other's-throat society, because the creatures on the Funny Farm live in harmony, no matter how different they are. It's not quite the biblical tale of the lion lying down with the lamb, but as friendships go, this bond is pretty jaw-dropping. Between Emily the emu, a very large bird, and a goose named Airplane because of her wounded wings.
Can you see the emu from here?
Oh, yes.
The emu
that's
and Airplane.
Emily. Oh,
Emily.
Airplane's, oh my God,
Emily,
look at
and
that.
I mean, he
Just
is
what you
glued to
said.
her. That goose is just always wherever she is.
Look at that. Do you know why the goose loves the emu?
Maybe he likes larger women. I don't know. I said, what do you I'm not really sure. I thought it's possible that she protected him at one point that we just don't know about. And he thought, you know, this is my protector and I'm going to stay with her.
Zaleski introduced us to another cross-species couple.
Look at how beautiful that animal is. You're very attractive.
A donkey and a very kissable llama.
So this is Lorenzo.
This is Lorenzo.
And this is
and
Jethro.
This is Jethro.
So tell us about how this friendship developed.
Jethro was here with his horse that passed away.
The pony died, and Jethro went into mourning.
He did go into mourning, yes. This poor guy was suffering because he was so sad. Lorenzo came, and they bonded themselves. They just found each other. I mean, these two are such an odd couple.
An even odder couple might be Yogi the steer and Cooper the alpaca.
Look, see how he's waiting? Look, where is he? There's your buddy. He's coming out too. Wherever Yogi goes, he goes.
They make an adorable pair today, but 2 years ago, Yogi's long horns ripped a hole in Cooper's side by accident.
When I tried to take Cooper to the hospital, Yogi was definitely freaking out.
You told me he cried.
He cried. He went, "Ma!" Like, where's my, it broke my heart. It's, you know, where's my friend? Where'd you take him?
Are they really missing them? Are you attributing human emotions to your animals? You're making it up.
I absolutely think that they miss each other.
But was it grieving?
I think he was grieving, sure. People say they don't have emotions. They do have emotions.
But scientists complain.
Scientists, schmientists.
What do they know?
What do they know? What do they have in their backyard?
Exactly. So what's your favorite coupling?
Dogs and dolphins just
And
have.
they play
in
in the water?
Yes.
Jennifer Holland has collected dozens of stories of unexpected animal affection in Unlikely Friendships, one of a series of unlikely bestsellers.
One of my favorites is an iguana with a cat. And the fact that the iguana not only would cuddle with the cat, but would let it play with his tail and lick him and share his food, those kinds of stories just really make me smile.
In the course of writing her books, the former National Geographic staffer had some questions.
You know, I wanted to know, was there science behind this? Do we understand why this happens? And started looking into it and realized we don't really have one answer because There's so many different contexts, so many different animals. It would be very difficult to do a rigorous study and explain what's happening.
But I wondered if in some of the cases it's less friendship and more pet owning.
I'm thinking that gorillas are very close to us, and that maybe our instinct for a little pet is instinct. I mean, if a gorilla is the way we are, we want a little kitten.
Right. And part of that may be kind of a little bit of that parental instinct, just kind of that instinct to care for.
Wanting to mother.
Wanting to mother.
Zookeepers often place orphan babies with mothers of another species who are nursing. I asked Holland if the need for protection might come into play. I told her about the goose and the emu.
And as you saw them walk along, you thought, oh, she got herself a bodyguard.
Yes. And also even with an animal that's blind, another animal may kind of turn into a seeing eye dog and protect that animal and show where the food is and just be the bodyguard, be the helper.
Animal altruism.
Animal altruism. I love it.
And when animals meet when they're young, anything is possible. How does that song from South Pacific go? You've got to be carefully taught to hate and fear.
What about the lion, tiger, and bear?
Oh my, yes.
Oh my, exactly.
Yes. So
and they were really pals?
They were pals, and these are three animals that would never meet in the wild.
These three predators turned pals were found as babies in a drug dealer's basement and brought to an animal sanctuary where they became lifelong buddies.
And it just happened that these three found something, again, positive in each other and pal around together. I think you see this in captivity so often because these animals are taken care of. They're not competing for food. They're not stressed. And so they have this luxury of being able to be social with other animals.
Laurie Zaleski takes that, if you feed them, they won't fight theory to a whole other level.
Okay, Leslie, come on in. I want to show you my roommates.
Oh.
I have 35 animals in my house right now.
Wait a minute. You have 35 animals in your house? What, like what?
I have 10 dogs, about 20 cats, a cockatoo who is louder than all of them put together, a chicken. Here's Adele the diva chicken.
She lives here with the dogs?
She does.
And they don't eat her?
They don't eat her, no.
You know what comes to mind? Noah.
It's like Noah's Ark. Yeah.
It's Noah's Ark. Saving animals is what Noah did, really.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're biblical.
I'm biblical.
You start the car, switch on the lights. Simple acts with costly consequences. Our colleague Robert Krolwich is back this morning to take us on an animated journey back in time.
Imagine a house, a normal house, with the usual appliances, dishwashers, refrigerators, vacuum cleaners, and of course an electricity bill, which comes every month. Now we're going to make this a Kentucky home, because in Kentucky they get almost all their energy from coal. And since we all know that coal is a fossil fuel, here's an idea. Let's go back and meet the fossils who died to light up this house. Well, we're going to have to go way, way back to the Carboniferous period. That's about 300 million years ago. And this here is a typical forest from that time. And this is a typical tree called a lepidodendron. Long, skinny little tree. They sprouted up as plants do, soaking in sunshine, absorbing carbon from the air so they could grow and grow and grow. And then, of course, they died, to be replaced by another set of lepidodendrons that also grew and died, another that grew and died, and another that grew and died. So after millions and millions of years, the layers of all these dead plants pressed down one on top of the other, concentrating all that ancient carbon and ancient sunshine into a hard black rock that we call coal. So, just for the fun of it, let's say our house here in Kentucky uses roughly 1,000 kilowatt hours of coal-powered electricity in a month. That's about average. Can we figure out how many of those ancient trees are in effect being harvested to power this home for 1 month? Well, it turns out that 1,000 kilowatt hours, that's the electricity bill, comes from burning about a half-ton of coal, which is the energy equivalent of 2 ancient trees, each one about 60 feet high. So that is what this home is burning every month, 2 old trees worth of carbon. Now, if we go for a year of electricity, that would be 24 of these trees. And then over a decade, over 10 years, we're up to 240 trees. And now you've kind of used up a mini forest of ancient energy just to power your home. And that does not include, by the way, the family car. Now, cars, we all know, also use fossil fuels. Gasoline does come from oil, and oil comes from, once again, ancient plants, but not trees this time. No. Oil comes from much, much teenier plant-like creatures, so small you can't see them with your eyes. But you do find them in the ocean, drifting about and rolling around, using sunshine to absorb carbon and grow and multiply. There are trillions, actually 1,000 trillion of these teeny plants in the sea. They're called phytoplankton. They're the basic food of the ocean, eaten by little guys and the big guys. And 100 million years ago, there were phytoplankton living in the oceans, and when they died, and their babies died, and the babies of those babies died, the ocean bottoms were gradually littered with sunshine-rich remains, creating a layer of stored carbon that, under pressure from the mud above and the heat below, compressed first into rock and then, under even greater pressure, turned into a black liquid that we now call oil. So, today, when you pump a gallon of gasoline into your car, you are mostly pumping the squeezed remains of countless ancient microplants into your car engine. Well, actually, no, they're not really countless because we can count them based on their carbon content. So we calculate that when you turn on the engine and step on the gas and go, for every inch of highway, you are crunching 20 billion ancient plants through your car engine. That is 20 billion for every highway inch. So if your grandma lives a mile down the road, that works out to 1,255 trillion plants giving up their energy to move you to grandma's, who, when she turns on the lights to say hi, she's using energy from ancient trees. So we are constantly using carbon that's been locked in the ground for millions of years, digging it up and putting it back to work. Well, for you and for me. We today are ravenous for old sunshine, so much so that if you add up all the coal and all the oil and all the natural gas that we humans use to power our lives in just one recent year, we'll choose the year 2018, and then think just for a second of all the ancient organisms that had to get squished down to make those fossil fuels. So that would be the old carboniferous trees and the carboniferous plants and the phytoplankton and ancient plant eaters, the little ones and the big ones in the sea, on the land. All those old organisms that got crunched into fossil fuels, if you drop all that old life into the container that we call Earth and burn them, it turns out that what we burned in 1 year weighs 100 times more than everything alive today. Everything. All the living whales and the elephants and the forests and insects and grass and crops and birds and fish and people, dogs and cats. Add up all the carbon in everything alive now, and still, in 1 year, we burned 100 times more. Or to put it another way, we humans gobbled up 100 Earths worth of ancient life. That's 55 trillion tons of ancient carbon in a single year. That's a lot of fossil fuel, and we are using it up very, very fast.
A Japanese woman, Kane Tanaka, is considered to be the oldest person on Earth. She's about to turn 119. But as Martha Teichner tells us, the key to unlocking a longer life may be found in the animal kingdom.
Don't call them ugly. Naked mole rats are the rock stars of research into what animals can teach us about living longer and better.
These guys live close to 40 years.
Stephen Ostad, a professor at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, is one of the nation's leading aging researchers.
They have this incredible cancer resistance. So they've got some trick for avoiding cancer, some trick for living a very long life, and they don't seem to get sick as they get older until the very end.
Traits they share with their much larger fellow residents at the Birmingham Zoo, the elephants.
This is Bulwagi. This is our 40-year-old male African elephant.
Chris Pfefferkorn is CEO of the Birmingham Zoo.
You don't see cancer in elephants. There's a theory that there's something in the system of an elephant that helps prevent cancers.
For starters, elephants have 20 of a cancer-fighting gene called TP53. Humans have 2. The Aldabra tortoise is native to an island north of Madagascar.
The oldest one of these that we know about is still alive, and it seems to be about 189 years old.
His name is Jonathan.
He's functionally blind from cataracts, but it took 180 years for him to get those cataracts. We may be able to learn something about keeping our eyes young from actually looking at how they manage to preserve their eyes without getting cataracts. One of the things that makes tortoises so long-lived is that they do everything very slowly.
But how then to explain birds, such as macaws, which can live to 50 or so?
Birds have sped everything up.
Now consider these tiny freshwater creatures called hydra.
Hydra are one of the few animals that you can say unequivocally they don't age. If you cut them in half, the top half will regrow the bottom half, and the bottom half will regrow a top half.
All these animals successfully repair or withstand the damage aging causes in humans.
And I'm going to show you a movie of these miracle worms. They're called C. elegans.
In 1993, biologist Cynthia Kenyon discovered how to double their lifespans.
So what we're going to look at is the normal worm. Here he is as a young adult. He's about 3 days old.
They're minute, here magnified hundreds of times under the microscope.
And this is the long-lived mutant. We change one little gene only.
So he's basically the same age as the other worm.
He's exactly the same age. This is the normal worm just a couple weeks later. Look, it's old. And here is the long-lived mutant one at the exact same age. Look.
He's like a young worm.
That's why it's like a miracle, just by changing one gene only.
Kenyon is vice president of aging research at Calico Life Sciences, a Google subsidiary pouring billions of dollars into trying to slow aging in humans. How big a deal is this?
It's huge.
And only getting bigger, as scientists look beyond traditional lab animals.
We're discovering new animals of interest to aging research all the time. And some of those are going to turn out to have the keys for preserving certain parts of our bodies as we get older. All we need to do is figure out how the animals do that. It's not magic, it's biology. And we know biology.
High atop the remote, rocky slopes of California's White Mountains, the harsh conditions make it difficult for life to take root. But for a certain type of tree, and for those who have traveled here to study it, this place is paradise.
Did they finish one already?
They've done that one.
Okay, they've done that one in there.
Do you want that one up there as well?
These gnarled bristlecone pines are the oldest individual trees in the world. Researchers like Andy Bunn have come to learn from the ancients.
Looking at this tree, would you have any idea how old it is? So I've been doing this long enough to not try and play the guessing game too much. It'd be easy for this tree to be 1,000 years old. It would be easier for it to be 2,000 years old. Older than that would be unusual, but not impossible.
There are bristlecones in this grove that are more than twice as old.
It's remarkable to sit there and have your hand on one of those trees and know that it was growing when the pyramids were built.
By taking core samples from the trunks, a process which the researchers say doesn't harm the trees, it's possible to extract their hidden history. Dendrochronology is the science of dating tree rings.
Each tree ring, they're formed annually, is like a time capsule of the environment for that year from which it was formed. And it contains many different types of information, chemical information, information on growth, climate information.
Matt Salzer is a dendrochronologist at the University of Arizona's Laboratory of Tree Ring Research, where he works alongside Professor Charlotte Pearson.
If you're trying to look at people in the past through time, tree rings give you a way to do it in a way that makes sense in a human life scale.
Pearson first became fascinated with the bristlecones after reading about an ancient volcanic eruption on the Greek island of Santorini.
It blew my mind that trees on either side of the world could possibly be used to date this thing to within a single year.
Massive eruptions can eject so much ash that they cool the entire planet. Since bristlecones put on narrow rings during especially cold years, scientists have used those rings to help establish an eruption date of 1560 BC.
We're moving backwards through time. Here we change between AD and BC, and we're into the BC period now, going backwards through time right to the very end where we come to 1700 BC.
By matching up core samples from live trees with wood from dead trees, it's possible to create a record that stretches back even further. The oldest known living bristlecone is estimated to be over 4,800 years old. Named Methuselah, the tree's precise location inside Inyo National Forest isn't publicized, and we won't be showing it to you here. Scientists are worried extra attention might attract vandals. Plus, in all likelihood, it's not actually the oldest.
Do you believe that there are older trees out there? Almost certainly. It would be naive to think that we just happened to get the oldest tree, when we looked.
Age on the inside isn't always apparent on the outside. Up a long, winding dirt road from the Methuselah Grove stands the patriarch tree.
It really does feel like you're, in the presence of something magnificent.
Though this is the largest known bristlecone pine, it's a comparative youngster at around 1,500 years old.
There's not a lot of places in the world where you can get a feeling of being around trees like this.
What makes this place challenging for most species might be the secret to the bristlecone pine's success.
They live in this sort of moonscape where they have figured out a life history strategy where they can eke out a living in this incredibly difficult environment, and they don't really have to compete with other organisms.
For Andy Bunn, the climate record written in the rings offers guidance for how we might think about what's happening in the present as we plan for the future.
What we're seeing increasingly is that a lot of the climate events that we are experiencing and living through right now have no precedent in the paleoclimate record. So we really are moving into uncharted territory.
Like us, bristlecones mark time in years. But their lives are so long, these twisting sentinels see a far bigger picture.
Does it give you some perspective on your own lifespan? Yeah, definitely. It gives me not only perspective on my own lifespan, but also on sort of human civilization, and to look back and to see everything that humanity has accomplished, and to go back and read the rings of these trees and to think about what humanity was like at different periods while those trees were growing is incredibly humbling.
Mosquitoes, those annoying insects that never seem to miss a barbecue, do a lot more than leave an itch to scratch. But help is on the way, and leave it to David Pogue to find out about it.
The deadliest animal on Earth is not the shark, or the snake, or the scorpion, or even us. Can you guess? It's the mosquito, like the one in this model at the American Museum of Natural History.
The diseases they carry kill over 1 million people a year, and in the warming climate, they're spreading to new places. In 2013, a particularly nasty species arrived in Fresno, California, Aedes aegypti.
She's evil. This is a female that will bite you multiple times. She's very, very aggressive.
Jody Holman works for Fresno's Mosquito Control Department.
The one thing that you can say with great certainty is we don't have any very strong methods of control for this particular mosquito.
Of course, spraying insecticide kills mosquitoes, but that kills other bugs too. So how do you solve a problem like aegypti?
That's where Verily comes in.
What I wanted to do was a variation on something called the sterile insect technique.
After 9 years at Google, working on its Chrome web browser, Linus Upson wanted a bigger challenge. And Verily, a Google sister company, was willing to fund his experiment.
If a sterile male mates with a fertile female, she'll still produce and lay eggs, but they won't hatch. Each generation gets smaller and smaller, and you can actually completely remove mosquitoes from an area.
So Upson hatched a plan. Build a factory that churns out millions of special male mosquitoes, each carrying a harmless natural bacteria that makes him incapable of reproducing. Release those males to mate with the wild females, with the EPA's blessing, of course, and presto, the mosquito population plummets. In theory.
Oh, wow. You have an airlock?
Remember, leave the mosquitoes in.
Pete Massaro, Google's director of automation, gave us a rare tour of Massaro's marvelous male mosquito-making machinery.
It's taking those now bags filled with food and L1 larvae, it's putting it onto trays. Those are going to then enter into the larva rearing robot.
For the next 6 days, this robot will keep the mosquitoes warm, feed them, and keep them company.
The females are slightly bigger than the males.
The next step is to separate the boys from the girls using a glorified sieve.
We're able to separate 97 to 99% of the males and females.
But 99% isn't enough. Releasing any females might make the problem worse. So this machine photographs each bug, studies the picture to determine the sex, and then blows away the females.
And that works.
That has worked so incredibly well that, to our knowledge, no females have ever left this factory.
Finally, these vans release the sterile males into the wild. Senior scientist Jacob Crawford was in charge of measuring the results.
I very clearly remember a huge drop in the hatch rate. I stood up and did a dance. I mean, that was our first field data showing that this could work. This could really work.
It really did work.
We got over 95% suppression of the wild population.
Your first outing, and it was that effective?
And we hope to make it even more effective still by releasing over larger areas for longer periods of time.
Debug Fresno ran for 3 summers, 2017, 18, and 19, and that was it.
It was a 3-summer prototype to work out the bugs. And the problem with the sterile insect technique is that if you don't keep releasing the modified males, the mosquito population bounces right back.
So in 2020, sure enough, those traps started to light up again. Those were heartbreaking conversations to have. I'm sorry, I know we had this really great effective program, but it can't come back.
But the Fresno test proved that Linus Upson's idea really works without chemicals, genetic engineering, or affecting any other species. Verily is now setting up the program in places where mosquitoes actually kill people, like Puerto Rico and Singapore. Of course, Verily is a Silicon Valley tech company. It's not doing all of this for free.
The goal is to make this a sustainable business.
The pitch to governments: we'll get rid of your mosquitoes for less than you're spending on the diseases they spread. It's been a strange, satisfying second act in Linus Upson's career.
Wow. I mean, it's not a web browser, right? It's nature. It's not all within your control.
Different kind of bugs we're dealing with.
Talk about unsung accomplishments. David, who knew? And why do I have the feeling there's plenty more where that came from?
There is, Jane. That mosquito story is also episode number 1 of my new podcast. It's called Unsung Science, and each week's episode tells the backstage story of a breakthrough in science or tech from the characters who did the breaking through, like the biochemists who figured out how to get the mRNA vaccines to work, or the NASA engineers who got the rover to land on Mars all by itself, or the storm chaser who discovered that something weird is going on with Tornado Alley, or the linguist who makes up the fake languages for Hollywood movies. It's all free at unsungscience.com or wherever fine podcasts are played. And if you listen to episode 1, you can find out how that mosquito program is doing in Singapore.
These next few weeks here at Sunday Morning, we're looking back at a few of our Sunday best. Stories we liked so much we'd like to share them with you again. To begin, Faith Saley with some small wonders of the insect world, who can teach some big lessons to the rest of us.
When most people think about ants, if they think about them at all, ants are pests in the pantry or on a picnic. But here in Belize, the ant is the king of the jungle.
They are constantly on the hunt, swarming under every rock and lurking in almost every flower.
So how many different kinds of ant species do you think are in the Belizean rainforest?
Well, right around here, I mean, there could probably be several hundred. In the tops of the trees alone, there can be dozens. Oh, that's a howler monkey. Excuse vertebrates.
Oh my God. I thought we were on Lost.
Eceton hamatum.
Mark
It's an
Moffat
army ant.
is a biologist,
Inside there, we have the queen and her brood.
author, photographer,
The queen there, that's her head and abdomen.
and ant enthusiast
Oh, yes.
almost from birth.
I learned early that ants are controlling the world under our feet. Down there as an infant, I would watch them doing all these things that were very human-like, building roads, working together to collect food. Ants do all kinds of things that even primates like a chimpanzee don't have to deal with.
Take the leafcutter ant. These insects live in societies of millions.
You can actually hear them, you get to know their sound. It's the motion of tiny little leaves.
And feeding all those millions of mandibles requires a lot of work.
This is a tough job, and their jaws get quite worn down by it. Their jaws, however, contain a lot of zinc, so they're essentially living can openers that can grab onto the leaf from one side, tear through with that other tooth on the other side, the way you use a little portable can opener.
A lot of these ants are carrying leaves with hitchhikers on them.
That's right, and this was something that early explorers even pointed out. Why are these little ants climbing on top of the leaves and getting hauled along? Well, one reason is it probably costs the colony less energy for them to stand on the leaves than to walk themselves. So this is just good economics.
Carpooling.
Carpooling it is.
These leaf cutters are carrying their booty back to the colony, but they're not going to eat the leaves.
No, they don't actually eat these leaves, and you would think they would because they're carrying literally pound after pound of leaf down this tree, but they actually turn them into a mulch on which they raise a fungus. They are fungus-eating ants.
They're totally farmers.
They are entirely farmers. In fact, they do everything you think human farmers do.
With behavior this complicated, they must be pretty smart, right?
Ants are not smart. In fact, if you watch an ant for any length of time, you're going to end up wanting to help it because ants are really very inept. What's amazing about ants is that in the aggregate, all of these inept creatures accomplish amazing feats as colonies.
And according to Deborah Gordon, professor of biology at Stanford, they do it all without a boss.
In an ant colony, there's nobody in charge. There are no bureaucrats. There are no foremen. There are no managers. There's nobody telling anybody what to do. We put a lot of effort into thinking through how to organize some of the things that we try to do as groups. Ants don't put in any effort at all. They're pretty messy about it, and it works really well.
Most ants, it turns out, simply follow the crowd. And now it turns out scientists are following ants to attack one of life's most frustrating experiences, air travel.
So Southwest Airlines said, help us figure out the most efficient way to get our passengers on a plane. And you said, I know, I'll use ants.
Because I know they do complicated things with simple rules.
Doug Lawson was a systems analyst at Southwest Airlines for some 20 years.
Well, we discovered that there is a better order in taking your seat.
Lawson used computer-simulated ants to determine the most efficient way of boarding a plane. which turns out to be open seating.
Southwest's way of boarding without seat numbers is actually more efficient than when I board another airline and know exactly what my seat is?
Right, when we simulated what the different airlines are doing, it turns out with assigned seat, there's a 1/3 chance that you're going to ask 2 people to get up. Whereas open seating, since the middle seat is the undesirable one, generally that's the one that's last to be filled, which means only one person is likely to get up, the person sitting near the aisle.
Did these ants have carry-on baggage? Were these ants cranky? How did you account?
Yeah, we left out bad behavior.
So ants may not be smart, but they can be efficient. Something to ponder while waiting in the airport security line.
Arguably, humans are too smart for the functioning of the whole society. It pays to be individually stupid. This is the wisdom of the crowds idea. Basically, all those little ants with their mostly ignorant choices, out of all of that emerges smart society.
All of which is to say, the lowly ant is actually pretty impressive.
We hear a lot about saving species on the brink of extinction. Animals, however, that are cute and well-known have a lot better chance than species who never make it onto a bumper sticker. Connor Knighton tells us that that is a reality that goes back many a year.
Someday, if you are in the right place and if you are lucky, you will look up and see an eagle on the wing. It's a sight to stop your heart.
The very first broadcast of Sunday Morning featured this report from Cobscook Bay, Maine, where bald eagles were on the brink of extinction.
The national bird is an endangered species.
40 years later, the eagle population has soared, thanks to protections put in place by the Endangered Species Act.
With your support and with the help of the Congress, we can reclaim and preserve the natural beauty of America.
In the decades since President Richard Nixon signed the Endangered Species Act, the landmark law has grown to cover more than 2,400 species. The good news is that 99% of them have not been declared extinct. The not so good news is that only 2% have recovered, like the bald eagle and the American alligator. Recovery takes time, a lot of time.
Check out
he's down there?
Yeah, he's way back down there.
Okay.
Consider this little guy, the dusky gopher frog, listed in 2001.
43.1 millimeters.
Nearly 2 decades later, there's only 200 or so in the wild, all living around this one Mississippi pond.
They're ready to go. These are very fit.
Enter biologists bearing Tupperware.
You guys are big chubs. You're gonna do good.
It's a picture of the Endangered Species Act at work. Inside of the plastic containers are more than 300 frogs bred through in vitro fertilization.
That one will be back in the spring to earn his pay.
They're being released at a second site in Mississippi in hopes that enough will avoid predators and disease and make it to adulthood and mate.
So let's go on.
But time is just one of the challenges to saving a species. Another is money.
We currently don't have enough money to recover more than probably 25% of all the species. So under current funding scenarios, we cannot recover everything. I'm not sure we can even save everything from extinction.
Attorney Jake Lee is the Director for Biodiversity at the Environmental Policy Innovation Center. Not only is there not enough money, he says, the limited funds that do exist are frequently misallocated.
There's huge biases in which species get the most money.
I'm gonna guess it's the cute ones.
The cute ones are a big part of it.
Lee says if you're endangered or threatened, it definitely helps if you are also cute, majestic, or economically valuable. Those are the species that frequently get the lion's share of government funds. But for every polar bear or sea otter, there are hundreds more, like the fairy shrimp, the New Mexico meadow jumping mouse, or the purple cat's paw freshwater mussel. 40% of endangered species are plants.
There are entire groups of Hawaiian plants that are very, very endangered. They're down to sometimes just a handful of individuals left.
And whenever one of these lesser-known species makes the news, it's almost always because of a conflict with one species, Homo sapiens.
The courts agreed with environmental complaints that the completion of the dam would destroy the only known habitat of the snail darter.
From the snail darter in the 70s.
One little owl ain't worth 10,000 jobs or 5,000 jobs.
To the spotted owl in the 90s.
Because they want to have us give over our land and turn it into a frog resort.
To the little dusky gopher frog, who leapt all the way to the Supreme Court last year. Endangered species are at their most controversial when they endanger profits and property. When you got that call, had you ever heard of the frog before?
Never heard of it, never.
In 2011, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service told Edward Poitevent that around 3% of his family's 45,000 acres of land in Louisiana had been designated as critical habitat for the dusky gopher frog. But no frogs actually live there. They're all 40 miles away, back in Mississippi.
There's no realistic possibility that a caravan of frogs would hop down the road and magically find my land by some sort of divine or froggy inspiration.
The government says the frog lived in this area before it was endangered, and Poitevent's land has the special ponds needed for its survival.
Well, the designation effectively takes our land out of commerce, because in order to develop it, we have to get the federal government's permission.
It's not that they have taken your land. It's still your land.
No, but they've effectively taken it.
Earlier this month, the 8-year battle finally came to an end. The government abandoned its efforts to mark his property as critical habitat. But despite these long, drawn-out struggles, every once in a while, the Endangered Species Act works as fast as a fox. At Channel Islands National Park in California, these foxes had nearly gone extinct when they were added to the endangered species list in 2004. Today, they represent the speediest recovery of any mammal in the history of the act. The island foxes now show up even when you're not looking for them, as we discovered mid-interview with biologist Tim Coonan.
No carnivore lives in a smaller, and what do we have? Got one?
That's right behind you.
Timing is everything.
Yeah.
It's an important time in the history of the Endangered Species Act. This summer, the Trump administration is expected to finalize a series of new regulatory changes to the act. One major revision would be to publish the cost for protecting and recovering any new species proposed for the list. We asked the Interior Department's Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, Greg Renkus, about it.
The law is very, very clear. The listing decision can only be based on the best available science and commercial information, not on the cost of listing the species.
But if you know that cost, don't you think that might influence whether people are more likely to protect it or not if you hear that it's obscenely expensive?
Well, I think the public has a right to know. And I think we want to be transparent in the decision-making process.
Another change would likely reduce protections for threatened species on the list, the step below endangered.
We want to accomplish the objective of the Act. We want to protect and recover endangered species and threatened species, but we also want to do it in a way that strikes a regulatory balance, that protects people and the public from, over-committing to this issue.
Changes to the act are necessary, says Jake Lee, but not ones that can make recovery more difficult.
The Endangered Species Act has recovered 54 species. It's prevented hundreds from going extinct, but that's not good enough. That's the problem. We need to find much better, faster, cheaper ways to make it work. Otherwise, we're not going to keep pace with the extinction crisis.
Many species may not have much time left. According to a recent United Nations study, plants and animals are becoming extinct at a rate faster than any time in human history.
Meet Daisy. We love our pets, often so much it's easy to be convinced they're lost in profound, important thought. So just what are they thinking? We asked our resident animal lover, Martha Teichner, to investigate.
Fenway, the Boston Terrier, is trying to figure out how to get at the treat.
hidden inside this puzzle. What's going on in his mind?
If somebody asks you, is my dog smart like a human is smart, how do you answer that question? I mean, what's involved there?
It's not fair or even correct to compare dog intelligence to human intelligence. The real question is, what is a dog good at?
Hey, Truffles. About 7 years ago, Dr. Gregory Burns, a neuroscientist at Emory University, had an idea. If he could train dogs to hold still in an MRI, a big if, he could get some answers. Truffles here is living proof it can be done. She's one of more than 100 dogs who've taken part in MRI experiments involving everything from facial recognition to self-control. Truffles is being shown 2 toys and knows giraffe means treat, whale, no treat. But what about photographs of the toys?
That's what we're looking for, activity in that location.
That's the reward center of the brain, right where it is in humans. The point? To find out if Truffles reacts to the toys and the photos in the same way.
Get it, Truff, get it. There we go. Good girl. Very good.
This is another dog scan.
It's too soon to say because this is just one dog, but what that tells me is they're not literally seeing the two equivalently. They seem to know that
one is a photograph and one is real.
Right.
Oh, yum. Ooh. Not to be outdone by a dog.
Hi, Donna.
Donna, a 38-year-old African elephant at the Oakland, California Zoo, makes the connection between a picture of a banana her trainer shows her and the real thing.
That's important because if you can imagine an object in your mind, that means you can think about that object and plan around that object. Does Donna understand that that picture of the banana represents a real banana? Because that means that she can imagine that in her mind.
Caitlin O'Connell Rodwell is an animal communication expert who studies elephants and teaches at Stanford University.
The elephant has the largest brain per body size, bigger than the human. If size matters, and it does appear that size matters, then elephants could possibly be smarter than us. Elephants are so much like us. Watching them caring about each other, watching their politics.
Elephant politics?
Oh yes, elephant politics.
Donna, move in.
As for communication, elephants understand us better than we understand them.
Donna, foot.
Behaviors Donna was taught to aid in her own care led to the banana test.
That's what's so exciting about these cognitive experiments with Donna is that we can now ask her a lot of different questions. Donna understands English.
Yeah, you're a real treat machine.
So there's probably a lot more that she understands about language than we've figured out how to ask her.
Thanks to technology, researchers are beginning to decipher dolphin language, the chirps and clicks that come from their blowholes.
We looked at how mothers would retrieve their calves, which we can ask them to do on cue.
Jill Richardson is a scientist at the University of Miami's Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Science. Her work at the Dolphins Plus Sanctuary in Key Largo, Florida, has involved identifying each individual's signature whistle, which is like its name.
This is underwater.
Yes. So you see the hand, the cue that the trainer is giving, and Ding is emitting a call.
A variation of the mother's own signature whistle.
And then baby comes back. It's like a mom in a room saying like, Jill, Lauren, come for dinner. And then the calf responds immediately.
It's like having the first and last name.
Exactly. My kids always know they're in bigger trouble when I use the first and last name. I really think we're scratching the surface. We know they're chatty. The next step really with their communication is learning how they might string acoustic signals together in different ways to have different meanings, like syntax.
Do dolphins speak in sentences? These dolphins obey more than 50 commands. But now watch. This hand signal means create. Do whatever you want.
We will.
Yay! Whoa! Oh my gosh.
What have the dolphins taught you about humans?
Oh gosh. I think the most important thing is that maybe we're not as smart as we think we are, and that it's definitely opened my eyes to how we put some constraints on our understanding of intelligence when it might be this much more colorful and broad experience for these animals.
Intelligence we underestimate because we don't know any better.